you're explaining the mental scorecard as, you know, the target, the shape of shot, the carry, you know, fully focused and fully committed. Now, I took that in the past couple rounds I've played, that concept, and I dumbed it down a little bit. You know, did I have a target? Was I fully committed? Was I focused? You know, and then I would rate it like that. And I feel like that was because I'm not shaping shots. I'm not that good. Okay. So at least shaping, yeah, exactly. At least shaping them consistently. So, yeah.
But here's one thing I would say to that is you still have to have an intention. You have to have an intention still, whether that's a draw or fade. I'm completely agnostic. I don't care, but you still have to have an intention. What the mental scorecard for a person averaging 87, you know, again, I don't think as many people track it as they used to, but they're at 81%. So fully a fifth of their shots, they're saying, I don't really know what I was trying to do with that shot. They have 1.42 penalties per round when that happens. Their second scorecard cost for an 87 shooter is actually over a full shot because their penalty rate becomes so high. Their birdie rate, negative mental scorecard birdie rate, I mean, some of these numbers are just crazy to me, is 0.41%. Their perfect mental scorecard birdie rate is 8%. Again, those numbers I do believe are probably a little jaded because of how hard it is to track that stat objectively. But we've still got someone who's averaging 87, whether it's 8% or 4%, they're still making birdie 20 times more often when they are just paying attention. And again, that's the deal, is that anyone's capable of paying attention. I really do hate using my own game so often as a litmus test for all this. But man, I'm 50 at the end of the day. I got 11 and 14-year-old girls. I run 2 companies. I don't play a whole lot of golf. But my mental game is so grooved from caddying so much that, like, I just don't make mental errors. I don't know if it's less testosterone as a 50-year-old or I'm not stressed out about money. I don't know what it is, but I definitely don't get mad on the course anymore. And I definitely don't try to shape the driver both ways. So the vast majority of outlier shots come from working the driver both ways or not knowing which way you're working it and not being committed to shots. I've basically completely eliminated those 2 things from my game. And as a result, I usually play pretty good. Yeah, I mean, relative to how much I play in practice, I definitely play great. And that's just, to me, again, back to the joke that I said earlier, golf is so hard that once you play it correctly, it's really not that hard. If I've got a shot pattern with a 7-iron at 170 that I know is about 25 yards wide, like, I should probably be aiming at the middle of the green, depending on some other characteristics. This is the other thing that from the podcast with Adam and Lou.
A somewhat good player, like when you said you missed right on a right pin, I'm thinking, well, duh, you're aiming right. And he's like, no, I'm aiming middle of the green.
Yes, I'm aiming.
Like, worst spot ever to miss would be right.
Short side. You don't want a short side. And then, you know, again, coming back to my buddy Lou, he was talking about how bad numbers go up when you short side yourself on greens that are undulated, right? If there's a 2 feet differential and so many greens, you play like a Donald Ross where you have, crowned greens, or a Jack Nicklaus course where he's got, runoffs all the places. If you short side yourself on one of those, you're going to do really well to get down in 3 from there.
Yeah.
You ain't getting up and down. You're going to take 3 to 5 shots.
Yeah.
Because you wanted to go after some stupid pin.
Yeah.
No, be smart, play to the middle of the green, make the game easy.
Mm-hmm.
People would be like, well, aim at the middle of the green. Well, what if the green's 52 yards wide? That's not a good idea. What if the green's 17 yards wide? Like, strategy cannot just be boiled down to aim at the middle of the green or not. Unfortunately, there's just way more to it that goes into that. Golf is the only sport that's not actually taught on the field of competition. At least like basketball, we're on the court. Tennis, we're on the court. Like every other sport plays on a uniform field of competition, and it's taught on the field of competition. Golf, every hole is different. You're not even taught on the course. You just are expected to go figure it out on your own. And then you're listening to these announcers that, like we were saying earlier, half the stuff they're saying is just patently wrong anymore. I don't know why they refuse to listen a little.
Yeah. Funny fact about Adam, since you brought him up, is that when he watches golf, he has it on mute. Like, he doesn't even want to listen to the commentators.
It's just painful. Yeah. I mean, and again, I'm definitely not trying. I don't want to come across as though I'm picking on him, but there were just a couple of things like the total feet of putt made. Just to actually put a ribbon on that, or a bow, whatever the saying is. if you have 10-foot putt, if you make 2 of them, you've gained 1.2 shots. A 60-foot putt, if you make a 60-footer, the average, tour numbers, the average strokes to hole out from 60 feet is 2.2. So if you make a 60-footer, you've gained 1.2 shots. If you make 2 10-footers, you've gained 1.2 shots. Except for in total feet of putt made, you've got a 20-foot total and a 60-foot total.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's just total feet of putt made. It just doesn't matter at all. And again, my main thing is getting people to track stats is hard enough. We want to make sure we're tracking relevant stats. It's also kind of like when I was having lunch with Mark Brody one time at the PGA show, we're sitting there with David Ogren, and David's like, what's the most important one stat you can track if you're going to track anything? And I thought about it for a second, and I was like, well, greens and regulation is the most correlated to score. So I would say greens and regulation, which is what Lou's answer was on the podcast with you.
One of the strokes gained apps to get their strokes gained numbers for each part of the game. And they're doing, a lot of golfers will do fairway hit, green hit, number of putts. A lot of people do that. I would tell you to stop doing fairways hit. Just take that off the list. I'd also tell you to stop tracking how many putts you had. Remove those. Greens is good. Greens and regulation are great. There's a really strong relationship between how many greens you hit and what your handicap's going to be. But for fairways, stop tracking that and start tracking instead the number of tee shots that you hit where you had a reasonable chance to get it on or around the green in regulation. That's a successful tee shot. That means not in the water, not in the woods, not OB. We're going to come back to sand traps in just a second. That means you have a relatively reasonable chance to hit a green in regulation. That's a success.
That makes it the most irrelevant stat to track. If you tell me you average 76, I can tell you hit about 10 greens around. And it's like, oh, telling me how many greens you hit in regulation on average is again, by definition from correlation, is the most synonymous thing with just telling me your scoring average.
Yeah. So you can guess that really fast. So what did he say then? Putts?
Mark,
number of putts?
Well, no, total putts is more driven by your greens and regulation. So that's why total putts is relevant. The most important stat to track, I don't remember what his answer was because he blew my circuits when he said that. I'm going to bet it would be strokes gained putting.
Yeah.
Because if you tell me, so again, a strokes gained putting for a person averaging 73, again, these are against PGA Tour numbers, is minus 0.8 putts per round. For a 76 shooter is minus 1.8. So again, back to that same idea. As your scoring average improves from 76 to 73, out of those 3 shots, one of them is going to come from strokes gained putting. Fully a third of those shots. But so it'd be interesting to see, actually. I do think there's more variance in how good people putt based on, that was actually an interesting stat. Lou did say the top and bottom 5% of 10 handicap putters putt like a scratch and like a 20. So if we've got a 10 handicap, the best 5% putt like a scratch and the worst 5% putt like a 20. That's a far wider window than greens and regulation would be.
Yeah. And actually, I don't remember Lou saying that. I mean, I remember it a little bit, but that is such gold right there.
Yeah.
That really tells me right there that the top 10%, the ones winning. I feel like it's the people that make the putts.
But this is the problem. Yes. But again, here we are going back to, we were talking about 10 handicaps. So that's actually baked into their score already. So that really wouldn't impact who's winning. If you had 30 10s, being the best putter and the worst putter in that group technically should wash out. What would actually be more interesting is because I could teach my 11-year-old to not even hit a golf ball. I could teach her to putt at a tour level, I would assume in a few years. And she could literally just be like, tee up a driver and like, I don't know how to hit a driver. The thing about ball striking is, and it's why if you just go straight down the ball striking stats, there's your best players. If I hit the ball good, and that's probably a huge reason that I don't really play bad very often. I can definitely get hot with a putter on accident out of just pure variance. So Mark Brody's quote is, the winner every week is the best putters of the best ball strikers, but the best ball strikers are there every week in, week out.
But you would say that and you've probably had so many rounds like that, but you were making the putts.
Yes. I'm always looking for actionable advice. Okay, Scott, you need to go low today. We'll go make some putts today. Oh, I didn't think about that. Damn, Tori, I got to listen to your podcast more often. That it's just not actionable advice. Just like hit the ball better isn't actionable advice. What is actionable advice is go out and try to avoid the Tiger 5.
Yes.
That you can go do.
Yes.
And so again, it really does feel sometimes when you start talking about stats that you're kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth a little bit.
Like I just did.
Yeah. But I mean, again, like on average, if you said, you're just going to randomly lay a golf fantasy bet down. First of all, when people ask me that question all the time, I have to sign a PGA Tour ethics clause, so I can't actually answer the question, but I'm so boring. Even if you asked me the question I answered, I'd be like, I'd start at number 1 in the world and I would go from there. Like I got nothing else interesting to say about it other than the best players are the ones with the lowest average scores. Like, again, obviously by definition, trying to overthink it beyond that is kind of a fool's errand.
Yeah. Okay, Scott, I want to touch on the distance, how you explain distance in your program, and just showing that when the player was hitting 20 balls with their 7-iron, how the variance is. Like, yes, they're averaging, like you had the line at the average, and there wasn't a lot above it, but there was a lot underneath. I think that was really interesting to me.
So what she's talking about there is I have a video in the Decade app where I'm talking about basically trying to figure out how far you hit your irons. The only way to do this is on a driving range with a launch monitor with the ball you play.
Yeah. That you can borrow a launch monitor from the golf shop most times if you belong to a club.
Yeah. And again, but you've got to do it with the ball you play because you've got to have the spin rates the same, the launch, the trajectory. Like you've really got to do it with the ball you play. And then
it can't be the yellow pinnacle at the range.
No, I mean, I look back whenever I was playing professionally again in my 20s and I'm just practicing my wedges for hours on end with range balls. And it's like, now that I've got a quad, I'm literally just hitting balls this morning and I'm laughing because I'm trying to bring my trajectory down. And so I buy the 50 Pro Vs for $50 on Amazon, and I hit 50 balls out into the range today because I would work on a field with a couple range balls, totally couldn't care less what anything is about it. And then I would hit a Pro V1 to see what was the numbers on this. And I literally did that all morning because you're just kidding yourself. So like my Pro V with my pitching wedge is launching at 32 with 9,000 RPM of spin. A range ball might be 45 degrees and 3,000 RPM, like the exact same strike, the exact same everything. And it just bounces off the club face. So we need to, if you want to really figure out how far your averages are, you want to hit 20 or 30 balls with each club. Again, now we're getting in the minutia of becoming a great player. I'm not saying this sounds like fun, but this is what you have to do. We want to go out there and we want to hit those range balls. And I want you just to hit your stock shot. And then I want you to throw out about 20% of your shortest shots. We can't let outliers destroy the average. So if I had some sort of a really weird swing flaw where I just whiffed 10% of my shots and my sand wedge goes 100 yards, literally on the nose 90% of the time, and then every 10th ball I whiff, but I don't know which one it's going to be. I can't play my sand wedge at 90 yards. I would still play it at 100 and I would just cross my finger the whiff didn't happen that time. So we can't let the outlier shots destroy the mean. So you want to hit 20, 30, 40 balls with each club and throw out your shortest 20-ish percent and take the average carry of the rest of those. And that's how far you hit that club. Now, the problem is that will be shorter than when you hit it perfect. So the what you were talking about in the videos is I had Aaron Wise at the time. He's the reigning PGA Tour Rookie of the Year. He had just won the Byron Nelson a couple months before, won the NCAA. This guy's really good at golf. And I told him I want him to hit a 110-yard sand wedge, just 20 straight balls, the exact same shot. And out of the 20, he only hit 4 past 110. He hit a whole bunch, 107, 108, and 109 even. But if every time Aaron Wise was 110, if I was caddying for him, I told him he was 112, he would be a materially better player. So the averages of all these 110 shots, kicking out the shortest 20%, the average of the rest of them was 108. only that difference only becomes bigger with your amateur golfer. And honestly, the way I illustrate this point to tour players when I first start working them, I'm like, man, those amateurs on Wednesday, they have no clue how far they hit the ball, do they? They're like, oh my God, they're idiots. I'm like, cool. You don't either. Just slightly not as bad as them. And that's the problem is, so like my 8-iron, if I hit it just perfect, it's going like 163 or 4. But my 80 percentile average is about 160. If I'm 160, I need to still just go ahead and try to hit it perfect. And if I happen to pure it, yeah, I'm probably going to have 15 or 20 feet coming back. But if I start trying to take off a little bit, I've now just shifted my average down. I've made my stock shot a lot harder. People need to hit a lot more stock shots than they do. Stuart Sink is a guy that I've worked with, and he basically has full shot, 5 off, 10 off, next club. He's not getting into the minutia of this one video I've got in the app. He's like 187 on number 18 at Harbor Town. And he and his son are talking about like, again, he's a giant guy and hits the ball a mile. So these numbers are all relative. But he's like, is it a 5 off or a 10 off 7? And his son's like, I got 5 off. And he's like, okay, cool. It's 5 off. He's not even thinking like it's 182 or it's this. He's like, I've got a full of stock, a 5 off, a 10 off next club. And I think that most players should probably have a stock and a 5 off and a next club, a stock, a 5 off, and a next club. And if you're not hitting your clubs with more than like a 10-yard gap, which I imagine a lot of female players aren't, it should just be stock every time. I mean, it's one club or the other. And just if it's on the front, I'd probably go with the longer one. If it's in the middle, I'd probably go with the longer one. And if it's on the back, I'd probably go with the shorter one. Because again, this is where when people get like laughing about, well, in the men's game, which again, I work with a lot more men than women, but I have worked with a number of females that have won NCAA championships and major championships and everything too. But when guys are like, well, but if I do that bag setup, I'm going to have a huge gap, you know, in between my 3-iron and my 3-wood or somewhere along the way. I'm like, when we decided on 14 clubs, people hit the ball 150 yards. That's why they decided on 14 clubs to have a club every 10 yards. Most of your female players that are averaging in the 80s, and most of like honestly, most of your men, they're just going to have a 10-yard gap. The game is about stock shots. I mean, and that's where doing everything you can to hit as many stock shots as possible is for sure the easiest sound advice that I can give on a podcast like this. I mean, this game, again, back to the whole idea of make it simple, shape the driver one direction, aim towards the middle-ish of the green. If they're average greens, on average size greens, work on your speed control almost exclusively in putting, and try to avoid the Tiger 5. If you do those 4 things, I'd be surprised if everyone's handicap that's listening to this didn't drop by 40% over the next 2 or 3 months. Again, not to be like salesy of the Decade app, but like that's the nuts and bolts of the Decade app. And our average user over the 4-month term of the Foundations version, our average user's scoring handicap drops 40%. It is rare. Like I want to say it never happens, but that would probably be factually incorrect. It's rare that somebody does not improve. Like, I don't know that we have 1 in 500 members whose scoring average goes up. Most people improve somewhere between 20 and 40%. And it's simply because we're saying, let's not do this stuff. This is how the game works.
Yeah. Well, because you're becoming so much aware of your own game that, you know, you can only get better by knowing more.
The thing that frustrates the hell out of me is when people tell me what I teach is common sense. I'm like, well, it is after I told it to you. I don't disagree. Once I've told it to you, it's very obvious.
Yeah, but we need to be reminded many, many times on basic.
That's the whole reason I do believe most people, once they have a membership, they keep it for a long time because I got away from this principle. Again, that's the vast majority of the tour players I work with. We'll have 2 or 3 1 to 2 hour webinars. And then I don't hear from them until like 9 or 12 months later. And they're like, all right, dude, I need a refresher. And then we'll just an hour and a half refresher. And you do just need to keep on hearing it because it's so easy and obvious, but it's so hard to just play patient, disciplined golf and not try to force things. It's really shocking how hard it is. And again, that's where if you ask someone, okay, Decade, everything it's all common sense. Okay, cool. Who's the best course manager in the history of the game? Whether you're arguing for Tiger or Jack to be the GOAT, those are the 2 names that come up consistently. Well, if something's common sense, there can't be 2 that are better than everyone else at it. There's not someone I'm not better than you at adding 1 + 1. It's pretty obvious. It's 2.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's common sense. The course management is just not common sense. And even if it is, the main thing about what I've realized over the last however many years is that this has just become a diary of all the dumb stuff we want to try to avoid. Because this game, we all feel like every single round of golf we've played, we all feel like we should have shot lower. And it's about ratcheting in. Is that correct? And if so, what can I've done better? Again, like Tiger came up with these 5 things because he's a lot smarter and better at golf than I am. And he was actually really trying. He would finish a round of golf, I'm assuming, and be like, I feel like I should have shot 3 shots lower. Why is that? Compiles a list over 6 months, goes and looks for the commonalities, comes up with these 5 things. Me and my buddies, we just went to Chili's every night after a Hooters tour event and talked about all the dumb stuff we did, and then went out and did it again the next day. And I do believe in hindsight, because I've tried to figure this out. Like, how did you not stop doing that? I think that I had to just get physically better to stop making the bogey from 120. It never dawned on me. Maybe you could think a little differently. Maybe you could strategize a little differently. And that's how you're going to avoid the bogey. You don't need to physically get any better. Again, when I entered Q school in 2008, I was having dinner with a buddy, and he was like, man, you're really playing good. I'm like, I honestly think I'm better right now as a 35-year-old with a full-time job than I was when I was playing professionally in my 20s. And he's like, why is that? I said, to be perfectly honest, because of studying a bunch of poker. All Decade is poker math and mindset applied to golf. And just understanding, yes, I've got a couple math degrees, but I never thought of golf as a math game. But just understanding and making that shift 2008 and 9 and 10 made me just play better. I would love to know if I actually was better. I believe I was better without even practicing. And then once the data started coming out in 2010, 11, and 12 from strokes gained, it was just perfect timing of I'm starting to think of golf as a math game. Now here's all the data that you can use to support it, just like hole card cameras did in poker. Like the mystery's revealed. Again, it is so interesting looking back at it because it's so obvious and simple, but also at the end of the day, it's just not.
Let's wrap up with this. You mentioned earlier that you were getting frustrated with watching the NCAAs. Now, was that just with the commentators or watching the play?
Mainly the commentators. I mean, again, when I say frustrated, it's just like there's just a number of things that are like, well, that's a good miss. Well, unless you know where his target was, you don't know if that was a miss or not. And I do believe the fundamental question of course management, rather than thinking where's the place to miss it, which is what gets Tiger difficult, is Tiger says that all the time. I missed it in the right spots this week. I used to think in my 20s when you would hear Tiger say I missed it in the right spots, that just like meant mid swing, doesn't feel good. So I'm going to just miss it over there to the right in the right spot. If that were the case, why wouldn't you just fix your swing and hit it by the hole? Like,
actually, that's what I thought too. So
yeah, it's not how it works.
Yeah.
Even in brain science, the neurons have already fired. If you think that you're mid swing and be like, uh-oh, that ship has sailed, man. But that's exactly what I used to think. And so now in hindsight, you're like, if I've got this shotgun blast shot pattern and I am choosing, like, if this microphone, the flag, I'm shifting this shot pattern. It's not like I've got an hourglass shaped shot pattern where I can either hit it close or miss it in the right spot. Like, it's just not how it works. I've got this shotgun blast. And so the real question of course management, rather than thinking where's the place to miss it, the real question is how much do I not want to be short-sighted? I want you being as aggressive as the constraints of the shot, which are the length of the shot, the surrounding hazards, the wind, and the course conditions. Those are the 4 constraints that you're questioning. With those things in mind, how aggressive can I get? And then that's what, theoretically the Decade system helps you quantify each of those inputs into a decision. And again, this is where, as we were talking throughout most of the thing, people ask me, and I try to be honest, I hate feeling like a sleazy used car salesman. They're like, I'm a 12. Can Decade help me? Like, yes, by understanding a lot of what we've talked about already here in this podcast, what actually makes your scoring average go down, the importance of distance. I thought that's what you started to say earlier when you were talking about distance. If there's any one thing I think it's hilarious we needed data for, is to illustrate that hitting it far is a good idea. That's so obvious, it's ridiculous. But I mean, I'm the guy that told Bryson, you should hit it a lot for, like, he's the second player I worked with after Zalatoris. And we were up playing a practice round in Eugene, Oregon, and I knew he had his fairway finder and his big ball. And this is in 2015.
Like two drivers, one that would find the fairway and one that would go really far.
Two swings, same driver, two swings.
Okay.
And first of all, the fairway finder does not find the fairway every time. And the big ball does not go in the trees every time. And so we get to like 5 or 6, and I'm just watching this like bunty, driver that's kind of going towards the fairway. And I'm like, all right, dude, I want to see the big ball. Like, you talk about this thing, and he tees it up like an inch higher and puts this absurd swing on it and hits it like 50 yards further. And I'm like, what are we doing? Like, why are we not hitting that more often? And I would give anything to take that 21-year-old Bryson and whisper in his ear, because his answer was, I just feel like if I do that too much, I'm going to hurt myself for sure. So I just like leaning on the fairway finder. I don't think distance is, that important once you hit it far enough. I wish I could whisper in that guy's ear, you're going to lose in the finals of the World Long Drive Championship in 5 years, 6 years. It's the most incredible transformation, I think, of any sports. Like, I don't think, aside from the baseball steroid era, there's been someone who's totally changed his game the way he has. And what most people don't realize is he didn't just start swinging harder. He did all the body work to prepare for swinging harder, and then studied what long drive people. Again, Chris Como is one of my best friends. His Como's living room lab is just down the street from me here. Like, I know what they were doing during the pandemic, but it seemed like when they shut down for the pandemic that he just got faster overnight. And it's like, dude, this was like a year's worth of work leading into that. And then everyone disappears for like 3 or 4 months, and he just goes all in on it. So yeah, but this was an 18 months in the work already. But to the point of all that, if you really want to get good at this game, hit it as far as you possibly can. I was working with Aria Jintengarn's caddy for a while, and I was getting really frustrated because she can hit her 2-iron past everyone's driver. And he's telling me, he's like, I can't get her to hit driver just because she's like, I can hit 2-iron past everyone, which I used to hit the ball past everyone back in my 20s. I've said those words. Why do I need to hit it? I already hit it past everyone. And I'm like, dude, your driver. And then one time I'm watching on TV and she'd just taken the driver out of the bag. And I'm like, I can't watch this anymore. It's just absolutely brutal.
Because she just uses a 3-wood, right?
Yeah. It was just a 2-iron for the vast majority of it. Just painful. You can see I've got my ripstick right here leaning against my thing. I do believe that some speed training sticks. I do personally like the ripstick one. I think it's an ingenious engineering with just the removable weights, so you only have to have one club. I like it versus the stack because it's the actual length of your driver, so it feels more correct to me, whereas the stack feels a little short. But it's a great product too. They've got a great app. I don't ever want to badmouth them for sure, because Marty and Sasha are two of the greatest people in the game.
Yeah, talk about numbers, guys.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But this is what's funny. So like I'm kind of the guy that has the mini driver coming back. I asked TaylorMade 3 years ago for 10 mini driver heads, because most of these guys, as Sasha has illustrated, the further the center of mass is off the shaft, so i.e. the larger the club head, the more that club wants to fade. The smaller center of mass on a mini driver head, and then the added loft allows you to play it back in your stance. So a lot of people are capable of really hitting a good hard cut with driver and then a nice tight draw with mini driver without even changing their swing. They're just changing ball position. That's where it's funny, because Ping is all now at this point, they're like, oh man, a lot of people are going to this. We don't even have one. So now they're just like kind of souping up this full sized headed driver and just cranking the loft on it to like 12 or 13. And it's like, we want the smaller head as part of the component to hit these draws. But once you've now got that to where you've mastered both shapes off the tee, you got one club that draws and one club that fades, dude, you've eliminated half the battle. Again, I know I ramble on, but I think one of the greatest quotes ever from Ben Hogan was, if you can't putt, you can't score, but if you can't drive it, you can't play. And I'm like, that is just so accurate. Again, I've always driven the ball very well. And I think that it probably masked how bad the rest of my game was, to where I'm like, man, I'm so close. Like, just work on these other little parts, because the driver is hiding to you how bad they actually are. But distance, back to that. I do believe that everyone, be careful, consult your doctor, whatever other medical nonsense you've got to throw into this. But like, if you just pick up these ripsticks and swing them, you're going to get 20 or 30 yards longer. Like, that's one thing. Lou was really incredible. That guy gained like 40 or 50 yards over the course of a year just by doing some speed training. And the difference that makes in your game, I mean, it literally cannot be overstated.
You look at some players that have added a significant amount of distance, and that was through dedication to trying to add distance through speed training and working on their fitness. And the combination of the two has allowed some players to add significant distance. I think, the best example of this would be on the male side several years ago with Bryson DeChambeau and how much distance he added. He was already one of the longer players in the game, averaging about 300 yards, and he added 22 or 23 yards to his tee shots on the PGA Tour, which is just an unbelievable gain to add that many yards at that level. And he got better because of it. His scores went down significantly. He won a lot more money. There's a very direct relationship to distance and what your scores are going to look like. Yeah, it is. I actually went through this, and you can Google, I think it was Golf Digest or Golf Magazine. I forget what it was, but they did an article on my speed gains like 2 or 3 years ago. I was swinging about 99. And I got that up to cruising at about 113, 114. So I added 14, 15 miles an hour of speed. And it didn't take that long. I mean, I did this over the course of probably 6 months, maybe 5 or 6 months. And I went from, kind of an above average amateur to swinging at tour speeds. Now I still stink. But I was swinging a lot faster, and my scores went down significantly very quickly when I added all of that distance.
Yeah. So wait, you have to tell me that when you watch Bryson now, do you see him only doing the big ball? Do you ever see it? Yeah, he's all big ball now. There's no fairway pounder.
No, which is insane to me. I mean, I literally die laughing watching him play golf. And this is where it's hard because that's where the game's going, period. That's just where the game's going. I think it's really funny watching one guy do it. I don't think it'll be funny watching 144 guys do it.
Yeah, that's true.
Again, this is where golf is more of a sport now. What is, in my opinion, the definition of sport is who can do whatever it is the most powerful with the most control. That's it. Pitcher, who can do this the most powerfully with the most control? Quarterback, baseball, tennis. Like, if golf half the battle, that being said, I do think that like 195 mile an hour ball speed, which I know is a silly number to say, I do think that's the highest usable ball speed. I think that once you start getting over that, which again, that's such an asinine number to even throw out there. Like, you shouldn't hit it more than 195 because that's carrying like 350. But once you are hitting, it's such a dumb number. It's like, oh, really? That's like saying jumping more than 13 feet in the NBA is kind of pointless. Like, obviously, at some point,
but you're saying there is a max. There is a max.
This is where the architecture crowd that hates me so much, they think that distance is just going to compound to infinity, and it is not. I've got a guy named James Hart Dupree, who's the 6'8" South African. He hits it with 200 plus mile an hour ball speed, and at least once or twice around, he catches it. It can be out of the middle of the face, but just because it's going so fast, instead of like 2,200 RPMs of spin, it's like a 1,400 RPM knuckleball. And at that ball speed, that's just always in someone's pool. I don't care where you are. It is 4 fairways over. And that's not through any fault of his. It's just like we all hit a little knuckleball every once in a while. Luckily, at our ball speeds, they're in play. I played with this kid's name, Chase Sienkiewicz. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. He just kind of went a little viral down in Chile on the Latin American tour a couple of weeks ago. They had him hitting 9,000 feet and showed him carrying one 370 with 190 something mile an hour ball speed. I literally played with him here in town last week, and he carried one downwind 12 or 15, 370. I hit the ball really far. He's hitting his 2-iron 20 past me. I mean, it's these numbers these kids can do are so insane. Again,
that's the direction it's going.
It's the direction it's going. I mean, it's just, and so whereas we may have a window from, let's say 165 to 185 ball speed right now, so a 20 mile an hour window, I think that's going to go higher, but it's also going to get tighter. So when people say like, is there no room for Tom Kite on tour anymore? No, there's not. There just isn't. I mean,
Or
everything.
Luke Donald.
Yeah, everything they do has to be right. I actually was trying to figure out how to do a post on this back after the PGA, and I never actually figured out how to make it concise enough. I'm trying to find
Well,
it.
what were you going to say?
I was trying to basically use Zach Blair. I was basically going to show, here we go. And I know you won't be able to see this, obviously, but on this other monitor, what I've got, the bottom one is Zach Blair's tee shots, and anything red is his negative strokes gained on that hole. That's the same thing for Bryson and same thing for Xander. This one hole, number 6, they weren't able to hit driver off of because the way it pinched in. So Zach Blair, like they were going to be negative on this hole kind of because of the design. But beyond that, even if they miss the fairway, they're still gaining shots because of hitting it so far. Whereas Zach Blair can actually hit the fairway and still lose strokes on the hole. He has an upper range of possibility. Even if he hit 100% of his fairways, it'd probably be close if he's going to lose shots. But Bryson could literally miss 100% of his fairways. And as long as his penalty rate wasn't out of whack, he would still be positive. If he drove it as bad as he possibly can, it would still be better than Zach can possibly drive it. And now just multiply that times 144 guys. Now give a 23-year-old kid, be like, well, you're young, you're still full of testosterone, you love lifting weights. And oh, by the way, if you hit it as far as you possibly can, you'll make millions of dollars. That's a recipe for disaster for a 36-year-old playing professional.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you give these young kids with more energy,
More time
to work out, more everything.
Mm-hmm.
Be like, oh, and by the way, that's a good idea. I mean, but the difference is when Bryson won the U.S. Open, there's my signed flag from Bryson after winning the U.S. Open. It was the most obvious final round that he was going to destroy them ever. And this is where it's hard to wrap your head around. And I know I'm kind of ranting as I always do here, but like, I remember when Tiger turned pro, people didn't think he would win the Grand Slam because like, well, he'll never win a US Open. He hits it too crooked. And look at the winners of the US Open: Nicklaus, Johnny Miller, Tom Watson. Okay, there's a Tom Kite sprinkled in there every once in a while. But historically, even before Tiger, the guys who win the U.S. Open are the bombers because the more narrow the fairway and the worse the rough, the less important hitting fairways is, which again, nobody's hitting any. So I may as well be 70 yards further up in the rough. That exact same thing comes back to the amateur game. I mean, this is where you'll get the little memes, the Golf Digest memes. Would you rather never 3-putt again or hit every drive 300 yards in the fairway? How many times do you 3-putt? Even the 10 handicap, whatever we were talking about earlier, it's 2 or 3 times around. If you hit every drive 300 in the fairway, you would gain.
Trust me, I've always gone driver. Yeah. I've never said no 3 putts.
Yeah, I mean, and some of the questions are just like, it's not even close. And the comments when people will start trying to argue the 3
no, there's people that stand on 3 putts, no 3 putts.
Yeah.
It's, I can't do it.
Someday.
I don't know. I'm scared.
Getting rid of Twitter was the best decision of my life. So,
well, actually, so let's end there. Tell me where Decade Golf is going. What are your goals? What's your upcoming goals? What are you thinking?
I don't really have any, honestly. So when I quit playing professionally, it was in 2001. I started an electricity company when Texas deregulated. Like that was my job until about 5 years ago, let's call it. So this decade thing, I really did do all of this work for my own game. I actually got a cortisone shot in my right elbow. The 2013 US Mid-Am, I caught a root on the second hole of the tournament and jacked my elbow, which slowly led into over the next 9 months. I had a lot of free time to start going through all the strokes gained data because my elbow hurt. And finally, 2 weeks before the Texas Amateur, I got a cortisone shot and the guy paralyzed my right arm for a couple of days, which obviously it came back to life. No, it was something else. But so that's the whole reason I called Zalatoris, who was just a 17-year-old junior golfer at my home course, which when I had Korn Ferry status in 2009 and 10, he's out there as the 9 and 10-year-old. I'm the Korn Ferry player, so he's just tagging along with me. We're doing chipping and putting games and everything. And so when it came out, the doctor's like, I didn't do anything in there, but there's definitely some inflammation. I definitely was obviously close to the nerve. I wouldn't play golf for a couple months. I'm like, I literally just did this 6-month project on strategy. It's the whole reason I called Will. And I'm like, let me caddy for you in the Texas Am. I got something here. Let's go through it, and then we'll go out. And if you just do what I tell you to do, you're going to win. He wins by 3. And I'm like, wow, I didn't actually think that was going to work. But I go caddy for him then in the US Junior the next month. He wins that. The SMU coach then called me, because it's the guy I've known since junior golf, and is like, Bryson DeChambeau, I can't get this guy to not play too aggressive. Will you teach it all to him? I teach it to him in February of 2015. He wins the NCAAs and US Amateur 2 months later. Like, those are my first 2 students. And it's like, oh, I've got something here. So to your question, what's the goals? I just really like helping people shoot lower scores and not be so frustrated. I've really enjoyed making this app. I used to teach it in like a live seminar, basically. And the NCAA, after my next students were included Morikawa and Stanford with Maverick McNeely, and like finally they called me and they're like, what are you doing? Because you can't teach golf. And I'm like, I'm doing everything I told you to do. We're just teaching this indoors. And then they banned me from doing that in person. So then I was like, okay, I'll just voice over the same seminar. That's literally what it is me just voicing over my live seminar in the Decade app. And so honestly, just selling that and getting positive feedback from people that it's really helping them and they're enjoying the game more. And then obviously we've tried to build features in the app that makes it pay for itself. If you're a person who uses yardage books at all, I know obviously we've got a lot of 80 shooting females here, but if you've got kids, male or female, that play high school or college golf, the app is just built for them to be free by eliminating the need to buy yardage books. So I really have tried to do, it's not a cheap app. The Foundations version is $125 and Elite's $325. But if you buy 4 or 5 yardage books a year, the app literally pays for itself by giving those to you for free. So the real goal and just fun is just getting to watch that. And then honestly, now that I'm 50, I just want to try to find enough time for my own game. I got my US Senior Open qualifier this Tuesday coming up, and I definitely hit the ball far enough to compete with them. So I would just love to get at least.
Wait, is this your first year qualifying?
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, no, super exciting. Again, like,
do you have to keep your expectations intact because there's a part of you that's like, I'm obviously going to go there and annihilate the field because I'm 50 and young and.
Well, I definitely don't think that, but I definitely think that I could. I'm 6'1", 220. Like, I'm a pretty big dude. It's not 220 of fat. Like, I've just always been a big guy. I still have low 170s ball speed. I played in Champions Tour Q School last year. I'm just hitting it 40 or 50 past everyone. Unfortunately, I tore a muscle in my ankle at the end of July. So I didn't even get to play golf in August, September, or October. I played golf 9 times in November and then went and finished 21st at Champions Tour Q School with them taking 18 and 2 alternates. So I've barely missed making it through to final stage without even playing. And so if I can find the time, that's why when people, when you ask me what are the goals, I'm like, my goal is to not have to screw with this app. My goal is for it to be done and actually go play my own game. I've only got so many years of low 50s where my distance and brain, again, can be an advantage. Yeah. Stuart Sink still makes cuts on the PGA Tour and still is very competitive out there. He's 51 or 2 now. Like, these guys can still play. You're not going to just go out there and run them over. But I do think that with the unique skill set that I've got in background, if I can just get some starts, which the only problem for that is the only things I can try to qualify for the US Senior Open and the British Senior Open. So I'm going to try both those. And then it's wait till Champions Tour Q School again, try to be a little healthier this year. But it's fun. Again, I'm definitely on team. I'm a better human when I'm playing competitive golf. I eat a little better. I drink a little less. I work out a little more. I meditate a little more consistently. So I'm not the guy that just wants to retire and go off into the pasture. Like, I want to play and compete as long as I possibly can.
It's a good motivator for you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Which is what's so hard, because the vast majority of golf I play with these days is still with 20-something playing professionals. And it's definitely become, I've never had anyone hit it past me before. I've never. My entire life, I've always been the longest of anyone I play with, in professional golf or not. And playing with these kids and watching them hit 7-iron sometimes where I'm hitting 4 or 5-iron and hit driver 30, 40, 50 past me. Like, it has been.
You're feeling what the other end was, what the other side felt.
It has been hard.
Well, I want to qualify about the program, and I've said it too. There are things that you might look at where you're like, okay, this is not for me right now. But I do think that there is a lot in the Decade Golf program that you can take out of no matter what level you're at, because honestly, there's not a lot of people doing it. The people that you're playing with, there's not a lot of people working actively on their game. So just by becoming more self-aware of your game and how to play the game, it will just give you such an advantage. I really believe that.
And I appreciate that. But I do firmly believe that if you feel like you should have shot lower every time you play, there's only one of two things that's possible. You're not as good as you think you are, or you made mental and strategic mistakes. Like I truly do believe that. It's a great sales soundbite for me, but I do believe that. But critically to your idea of can the upper 80s persons glean anything from it? Ever since having COVID, I've had a lot of blood pressure issues. I was a 36 handicap cardiologist in January of 2020. After having countless cardiology appointments, countless blood pressure med changes, I'm probably a scratch now. Would you want me operating on you? No, but I know what I could definitely prescribe you the right medicine at this point. And so that's only come from listening to and talking to actual cardiologists, not by actually, going to school or working on my short game, to complete the analogy. If you want to get to scratch, you're going to learn this information at some point. And you can either do it through blood, sweat, and tears on your own, or you can have a glass of wine and watch a couple hours worth of tutorial content and learn it in an afternoon. It's literally why I named it Decade. I originally bought the domains beyourown.caddy.com because after I caddied for Will, and then the SMU coach came up to me, and he's the one that told me, he's like, I think you've got something here that you could teach someone. Like, you've got a product. And it wasn't even the goal. So I originally was like workshopping beyourown.caddy.com, but then Will sent me a text after he won the US Junior that said, I'll never know how to thank you. You've given me 25 years of experience in 5 days. And so the point of Decade was to say, we're going to take decades off your learning curve. And I've thought about doing a podcast if I wanted to do more stuff and not practice my own game. But the name that I would do it is Decades to Days. Like that would be the podcast if I started one. But there's so many people like you that do such a better job than what I would do. I would ramble. Well,
and you're a perfect guest, and you can continue to work on your game. You're not taking up all the time of producing a show.
Exactly.
So boom. Well, Scott, thank you for being on today.
Absolutely.
This will not be the last time, because I really enjoyed our conversation of all lengths, game, what's going on in the game today, and, improving our own game. I really appreciate you being on and sharing with our listeners.
Anytime you want, I'm always in.
Yeah. And everything you need to know about getting to the Decade program and getting in touch with Scott is in the show notes. And
we finally actually have taken it a little bit more serious as a business. We actually have the domain decade.golf up and running.
Did you have to buy it from someone?
No, I bought that one free and clear. But again, like, the app has done really well, comically well. And I do say we've been successful in spite of ourselves, not because of ourselves. But now I've got a couple of employees, and like, it is an actual business. So now we're trying to take it a little bit more seriously. I mean, this is how bad I am. I had my domain is playinglesson.com. I didn't realize it had an email capture site that was on for 5 years. Had no idea. I partnered with some people to take over my email marketing last year, and I gave them the login to my domain. They're like, you realize you have 47,000 emails of people who've requested information from you that you haven't replied to. I'm like, well, you've got yourself a nice little sales funnel to start off with.
You know what? The joys of becoming, building a business and just figuring it out as you go.
Yeah.
That is how it's done.
It's a perfect
All right,
Scott. It's starting to get pretty bad out there right now. It's starting to come a little more often. So
yeah. Well, I appreciate you being on and spending the time.
Absolutely.